So, today I just have a single question to pose to you guys, and that is, why don't more people read science fiction? Welcome back to Card Chat. My name is Gerald. You're on the Workshop PM. And the real question about science fiction is that I feel that people always miss the point. They always look at it and they're like, oh, it's about spaceships, it's about stars, it's about weird concepts. Man, it's cold. Sorry, I gotta adjust things a little bit. There we go. Sorry about that. And the thing they're missing that I see time and time again is that science fiction is philosophy for the modern age. And that's a concept that really strikes with me. So, for example, when you read Asimov and the robot lectures and such, okay? And you can see in the thumbnail there, I have him right here, okay? Hey, when you read his robot stories, yes, on one hand, they're logical problems. But he's also talking about societal issues too. He's talking about mobs, riots, worries of losing jobs. There's all kinds of things he's covering philosophically within this single concourse that he's covering. And what's even more interesting is when you normally discuss philosophy, you're discussing this dead man versus this dead man's opinions, and then we try to interpret the opinions of the elders, okay? But what's really cool about science fiction is that the fact that it is living philosophy of the modern age. Because the fact of the matter is, you're engaging with these ideas in a theoretical. Suddenly, things that would be completely suspect, things that you would normally reject outright, you can simply say, well, it's just a science fiction story. So, who cares? This isn't happening in reality. We're not talking about discriminating against a person. We're talking about discriminating against an alien. There was a story I read called The Rithian Terror by Damon Knight, and that was the entire concourse of it. And mind you, the people in that story had every reason to discriminate against the Rithians, okay? The Rithians were essentially this parasitic being that would climb into human beings after killing them and pilot their corpses. But a Rithian could also just be a person, and there was a person in the story who said they have good humor. And if you pay close attention, the main character acts very much in a fascistic sense. So it's a commentary on both the fascism that he was seeing of his day and age with this strange alien other that you have every right to discriminate against because it's not human. But it still has a commentary. Now, mind you, I'm going to say that there's a difference between engaging with science fiction novels, science fiction games, and science fiction movies. Okay? Science fiction television shows and movies have a different impact. But, I mean, do they really? Let me think about that for a second. Like, if we look at, let's say, Star Trek, okay? We see the contemporary values of America at its time put into a utopian context. So it is both a very progressive show, very socialist show, but it's also showing like some conservative values. You can literally see characters argue these politics back and forth. And it's very interesting in the fact that this is one of the only ways any media has the openness to discuss politics and philosophy without becoming preachy. And I think there's something to that. I think there is a strength to science fiction to being able to engage in those ideas. A good example, I'm not sure if I can find it as fast as I would like, is I read through all of Liu Cixin's books. Not all his books, but what I mean to say is I read through his entire, what would you call it? It was not Dragon's Egg, although that I am still reading. And there's Foundation. Yeah, okay, so, yeah, Liu Cixin wrote 3 books. I am so terribly sorry about this. I should have had this planned out, but as you know, Card Chat is impronto on the back, and I just kind of do these as is. It's not the line. There we go. Oh, the 3-body problem, Dark Force, and Earth, and Death's End. And as you go through this series, okay, you see him essentially work out his feelings of the communist red revolution from his own perspective. Like, there's a lot of anti-communist commentary in there, which is very surprising from a celebrated Chinese author. But at the same time, he also has like a limited understanding of a lot of people, and you could even argue that he put in like a very sexist theme into it, where in the end of the day, it's a woman who screws up everything, and the only person who had like the only actual answer to the problem was an American who was the most brutal person of all. Go figure. These are loose spoilers. You'll figure it out as you go along. It's not really me telling you anything about the book. I'll do that when I sit down and try to break those books down in full. But he was doing multiple experiments with the series. He was doing like sociology experiments, like what would humans look like in the future if science does not advance, and we only really favor aesthetics. And then he moves past that and he starts talking about, well, science is advanced, but how would humans adapt once they are cut off from the whole, once they know that it is us or them and everybody else is isolated? It was a very, very interesting series. I was kind of let down by the third book, because the third book kind of had a bunch of cascading mistakes that were just kind of plot conveniences in order to explain some of the scientific concepts. And that's another thing you'll notice with science fiction, okay? There is two types of science fiction. There is allegorical science fiction, which is the kind I'm talking about today. And there is hard science fiction. Hard science fiction is very focused on discussing the concept they have in mind. But that does not mean it's not an allegory for something else, too. After all, they are drawing from something. Take Ray Bradbury, for example. Well, Fahrenheit 451. In Fahrenheit 451, he brings up the idea of these parlor walls. And parlor walls are what we would call modern-day smart televisions that are the size of an entire wall of a living room. Well, that's not very far off from what we have already now. I use a projector in my house, and more or less it is. And what's even more interesting is that these things are smart TVs, essentially. They have a camera in them, so you can be seen and interact, and they can see you and interact. And once you replace all four walls, it looks like you're standing in a room and anywhere in the world. This technology is so close to what we have now. It's just that we've decided to focus up more on micronizing. There's also, what was another prediction he had in that book? He talked about seashell radios. Well, guess what? See this thing in my ear right now? Seashell radio. Oh, Bluetooth headphones are exactly that. We've already reached this technological epoch that he more or less predicted from looking at the trends of his time. And that's kind of what you see with hard science fiction, and then they talk about the ramifications of said technology. And sometimes they get it right, because I kind of agree. The seashell radio, the Bluetooth headpieces do kind of isolate people. Well, you can see people talking to themselves, and in the past we would be like, oh my god, there's a crazy man walking by. Now we look at him and we're like, no, that's somebody who has a headpiece and he's talking to somebody else, and we simply can't see the headpiece, because mine's pretty obvious because I like the open ear designs. But they have tiny little bead ones too, which are so small you can't even notice. It's absolutely wild when you think about how hard science fiction kind of outlines the future. But allegorical science fiction is interesting too, because you get to a certain point in technology where, as Isaac Asimov once said, technology basically becomes magic. We do not comprehend it because it is too advanced, it's too beyond us. And then we're basically talking about the sociology, the civilization, the philosophies of the people and how they interact. And it's very rare we run into something very alien. For example, let's look at a person who would write science fiction as philosophy. That would be a good case example I can give you would be Robert Heinlein and Starship Troopers. That was a very political novel. There was a reason the Marine Corps actually had that on their reading list for the longest time, because it was supposed to get them into this conservative, hyper-militarized mindset. And that's exactly what the story advocates. It's an us versus them situation, and by all means, it's justified. is completely justified, okay? But we have to read the subtext when we read through these novels, because 9 times out of 10, these authors are actually bringing up something real, and they're talking about something real. Well, an example that comes to mind is let's look at Avatar, okay? Avatar, the movie, the original. I've never seen the sequels because I thought the original was dreadful. Like, it was a beautiful movie. That wasn't the issue. The issue was the message. And I'll just say it flatly, I'm an American, okay? So when and every member of my family has been in the American military. I have worked with the American military. So when I see something that is criticizing the American military, I'm just kind of like, all right, I get it. But and this is going to spoil that movie a little bit because I have to spoil it to talk about the ending. The ending of that movie bothers me to no end. At the end of the movie, the aliens are loading up the humans on the spaceships at rifle point. And it's all because of a human who turned traitor in order to side with them, and yet the aliens adopt the exact same tactics the humans had. Except for that's not necessarily true. Because the humans tried to communicate with them, tried to trade with them, tried to really open all doors, and it was only that one scientist who didn't do his job and went against the American interest. I mean, hell, even the colonel in the first movie, what is his name, Steinbeck or something like that, reaches out to the main character, and he's like, look, I get it. I understand. But we're here to do a job. We're here to do a mission. We're humans. We're Americans. This is the subtext here. And we're here to acquire this resource because this resource is so valuable to us that we must obtain it. And yeah, man. And the entire thing to that movie was it was an allegory of America going to war with the Middle East for the oil, and then it was more or less this praise of the local cultures over our own. But in this case, it really sounded like it's a existential crisis for the people back home, and yet you're siding with the locals. Do you see how that can kind of bug you the second you peel away the veneer the author painted? Now, mind you, that's a very political stance, and I don't mean to push my opinions on you people, but I'm still just trying to communicate there are these allegorical levels to the storytelling, and we can actually engage in these ideas. Because if I was to say what I just said right there, but I'm going to say it in the modern day context, then it would make me look bad. It would make me look wrong. But if I say, oh no, it's the aliens sitting on top of this resource and we need this resource, so we have to take this resource, and we're trying to find ways to negotiate with them, but the negotiations fell through, so now we're going to conquer them. Do you see how that changes the entire context of it? Because now it's a different species, it's not a different nation. And that's more or less what you can do with science fiction. You can kind of paint these wide pictures that really alter the scope of what we're talking about. And I find it so fascinating. So fascinating. There's all kinds of examples of this. There is, look at H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. There was a commentary on evolution in that, which is very interesting. There's countless examples. Hell, even in more abstract ones, like A Flat World. World was talking about abstract shapes trying to comprehend reality in higher dimensions above them. And there's so many ways you can interpret this. And you can only do it in science fiction. If you did that in a normal novel, you would be painting people by broad strokes. This person is a hero. This person is a villain. This person, it has nothing for us. This person is looking out for us. Yet, you peel that away, and you put it in the context of science fiction, and suddenly everything becomes clear. Now, I know I've repeated myself a little bit, but I'm just trying to paint a image, a line, more or less. It takes a little bit of reasoning in order to express this point. So, my real question at the end of this is, why don't more people read science fiction? The science fiction in the 50s was a huge hit. all the way from the 20s to 30s and 40s and 50s, it was massive, all the way up to like the 70s with Dune. And then something changed. We hit the Neuromancer generation with William Gibson, where science fiction became depressive. It became very depressed. Philip K. Dick with Do Androids Dream of Robotic Sleep? Well, that's an issue we're dealing with right now, isn't it? We're on the cusp of dealing with AI having these type of discussions with us. And yet, at some point, the optimism disappeared. At some point, all the medium became more and more dark and gloomy and did not look forward with optimism. And I find that interesting too, because the philosophy of the day, it reflects. And as you see, from 1980s onward in science fiction, the trend became dystopian. It became dark. It became, everything is horrible. Whereas back in the past, it was kind of optimistic. Like, mind you, it was still commentary, but it was still kind of like things are going to get better. Or they're not going to change per se, but they're going to be more interesting. And I have to think about that. That's another concept I'm going to have to think about. Okay, guys. Thank you for joining me on Car Chat. I've been Gerald. I want you guys just to sit down and, if you can, pick up a science fiction novel. Well, preferably something from the 50s or 60s. My recommendation for you guys to read would be, what is the name? By Henry Kuttner, or Robots Tell No Tales. I absolutely love that one. I should do an entire sit down just explaining how Gallagher is probably the best amoral scientist character. Like, I love him. He is so good. The commentary and the jokes in that series of short stories alone outclasses Douglas Adams, which is a huge compliment. But I hope you guys have a good night and take care. Gerald out.